Kia ora and welcome. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional Maori owners of this land, the Ngāti Whatuaki, on which we meet. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and any other elders that are here today. Oh look, it's great to be back. I first started my EVANS experience in this venue many years ago when you had your annual conference here, and although that year no one spoke to me, I think I had a trade booth downstairs. I've got many friends here now, which is terrific. It's great to see the travel bubble is now alive and working well. There's many other Aussies here, and of course we would welcome you all on our side of the ditch. Feedback from our friends in North America at IAVM would suggest that New Zealand and Australia have done exceptionally well in managing the COVID outbreak. Obviously we've both built up fortresses around our countries and we've been able to operate in somewhat isolation, but certainly sport and live music have helped our industry to get back to some point of normality. And of course, we've still got a long way to go. I know many of you in my role as a risk guy, but today I'm here really talking about the Venue Management School. For many years, education's been a really strong pillar that binds both the Venue Managers Association and EVANS together. We both have a very strong focus on professional development, and having worked and visited venues across North America, the Middle East, the Venue Management School in the States, I'm confident to say that the talent that we've got in our industry on both sides of the ditch is world class. And over the past 27 years, I think the Venue Management School has played a significant role in educating thousands of industry professionals. And many of you, of course, are from New Zealand. I'm sure Nelita will get a show of hands a little bit later to attest to this. Last year, of course, we had to cancel the school like many other events and venues shutting down due to the COVID situation. However, this year we are back. We're determined that we'll be running the school. We know that it'll be different and some of us won't be able to come, but many of us can. And again, the travel bubble is testament to the fact that we can cross the Tasman. So I'd like today to just introduce Nelita, and many of you know Nelita, who has been a very strong part of EVANS for many years. She's of course an instructor of ours at the school. She's also on the Venue Management School Committee. She's recently started a new role as the Manager for Venues and Events for Tauranga City Council. She's previously had roles at New Plymouth District Council. She's got 18 years experience in the venues industry. She's been a previous president of this association, and we're very proud to have her on board as one of our instructors. So we thought today we would just give you a little taste of what a lecture might be like. Note the blocked fire exit here as a prop, and I'll introduce Nelita now to talk about emergency planning.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Taranaki te Munga, ko te Moana te Pukupuku, a Tuaki te Moana, ko Namutu, ko Toronga te Kaianga, ko Byrne te whānau, ko Nelita Takuingoa, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to the VMS Taster. I'm going to share with you a little bit about the school and what the school's about just very quickly, and then we're going to go into a workshop in a classroom, very similar, to give you a little taste, a very shortened version of what you'd experience if you're at the school. Whilst the core function of the school is on learning in the classroom, is an integral part of the school. There's also the networking side, so it's the relationships that you develop and grow and build while you're at the school that really provide the gold that is at the school. So I'm going to give you a quick little video of a taster of what you can experience when you arrive at the school. Oh, I've gone too far already. of familiar faces in there. So unfortunately, we're not in the tropics and we don't have a drink in our hand, although some of you, well, we all will at Spark Arena later on, and some of you earlier for those that are going on Mark's walking bus. But imagine that you're in the classroom of the beautiful Kingscliff at the Salt Resort. It's 2 hotels, the Mantra and the Peppers, and it's just on the border of in New South Wales, but really with Queensland. So for most of you that are going in, you'll be flying into Brisbane or the Gold Coast if you attend the school. Just so I know sort of the audience, who's been to the VMS school? Show of hands. Oh, great. So quite a few. And the LI school? Yeah, great. Well, if we have enough time at the end, I might hit 1 or 2 you up and get you to share a little bit of your experience. So it's 5 days at the Salt Resort. There's some great networking that happens that, you know, as I said before, that ability to really develop and grow those relationships. We have a great trivial night, very hotly contested with the instructors. So, you know, we work out who's on our table and we're out to win, but it's a whole lot of fun. We have some town hall sessions, which are really great, really unpack some industry issues. We usually have a speaker from America, a guest lecturer, and we have a great Q&A session with them and really hear what's happening on the other side of the globe. We have activity afternoon, that's fantastic. So you actually get to see some of the beautiful landscape that you're in. But the most important part is actually the classrooms and what you learn. There's about 30 in each classroom, just depending on how many in each year, so 2 classrooms. The lecturers that are there are from within industry, so it's not teachers that are trained to teach. They're lecturers who have been involved in or are involved in the industry. They're leaders within the industry, and they come from such a breadth, whether it's stadia, theatre, arena, showgrounds, convention centres, as well as many of the venue service providers as well. So they have this really in-depth knowledge. And I think the value is, as a leader, the importance for us is about getting it right, not being right. So they really share some of the experiences they've had, both the pain and the joy on that journey. And as well as the lecturers, you also hear from the students in your classroom about learning from them, and that's the pure gold. Just want to talk a little bit about the Leadership Institute, because I know many of you, like me, as you've heard, 18 years in the industry. I heard Matt Brindle, 18 years. You know, we've been here a long time, and I know a lot of you have. For those that watched the Mask, is Jason Kerrison, you know, we're fossils. We've been around the industry a long time. But for those of you who've been in senior roles and interested in the Leadership Institute, you don't necessarily have had to go through to the school, so you can get to go along there. And it's the Institute is really focused on leadership, and it's a bit more in depth. It's 3-hour classes, normally with 2 or 3 instructors. It's a really small group of about 16 at the max. So you're having some really in-depth learning. So it is something to consider for those of you that have been in the industry a while. So that's probably my plug for the school, because that's, you know, you're here, you've paid your conference fee to actually learn something. So what I'm going to try and do now is give a little bit of a learning and a reminder for some of those and what things that you can actually take back to your workplace. Oh, see, I've been talking too much, I forgot to go through my slides. So there's the wonderful instructor group. We've scrubbed up pretty well. Now normally we're in black and white t-shirts, so we're very distinguishable. So emergency, I thought I'd focus on emergency management preparedness, because this was a topic prior to COVID that was really hot for all of us. And we had a huge focus on risk mitigation, and that's one subject. I think Wayne normally instructs that at the school. And then emergency preparedness is what happens when something does happen, because as much as we have those risks in place, those management to manage risk in place, things do happen. So what are our plans and procedures when something does happen, but also importantly after that? And I think COVID's actually sort of really highlighting that too. You know, we have this incident, and then what happens afterwards, or when it continues to happen. I usually ask students to the class to bring their emergency management plans so that they can have a look at them. And I'm sure most of you, and one, it gets them to pull it out of the drawer and have a look, but I'm sure over the last year or so, all of you have pulled yours out of the drawer, so you are familiar with them. Most of us and most of you have great plans for evacuation and regularly hold trial evacuations. But what about the other emergencies that can happen? What are some of the other emergencies that we need to have plans and training for? Does someone want to? Lockdown? Yeah. Yeah. Anywhere else? There's lots of many, like my beautiful Maunga, Taranaki. It's it's not extinct, it's actually an active volcano, so you've got volcanic eruptions, tsunamis for those that live close to the sea, medical emergencies. So for those of you that saw the game or would have saw the news over the weekend with the Finland and Denmark game, the soccer or football, which way you want to sort of call it, where Christian Eriksen had a medical event. So that was something that happened. And I know while what happens on the field, the stage or the court is usually the high-risk control, what happens in that venue, and we saw, for those of you that watched any footage, the ground announcer had to go on and talk to the audience, and what do you do? How do you manage those scenarios? So the importance of planning, I think we all know it. We just need reminding every now and then. We often get, caught in the doing, caught in the weeds. It's the basis for decision making. It's that starting point, that sort of decisiveness of what are you going to do and who's going to do it. How do you respond to an incident? Your stakeholders, who is engaged? Well, you will call your emergency services and you need to engage them. Who else needs to be called? Who else needs to be involved? At what stage do you call your health and safety rep? What stage do you bring in media? What is their role? What about your neighbours? If you're busy with the lockdown and your lockdowns and you've got a whole lot of neighbours on your border, do you need to involve them in your planning? How do they know that there's someone around that they need to lock down too? You need to manage your media and communication. Communication is so important. So for people in your venue, what are your plans for that? But what about the people outside your venue? How do they know what's happening, what's going on, depending on what the incident is? Your staff welfare, that's so important. So what is your plan? And I think COVID highlighted that a little bit. And staff are dealing with the incident, but what about afterwards? What support do you need to give them, ensure that their mental health and well-being? Staff also be concerned about their reputational or their professional reputation. So how do you put that support in? And supporting the supporters. Your brand and reputation implications. In the incident at Copenhagen Parken Stadium, every second line in the media and all the news articles was Parken Stadium. So everyone knew that happened. If the outcome hadn't been so good, what was the reputation of that stadium and how they dealt with it? And also then your long-term repercussions, bringing in your business continuity plans. So how do we ensure good planning? How do we ensure we have good events? You go, yeah, I know I need to do this, I have got some, do I need to expand on it? Where's your starting point? And most of you have all got good plans, but it's always good to refresh. I think this is a really good resource to have. It's the AS 3745 Australian standard, and it sounds really boring and really dry, but it is really good. There is some really good reference material in there, and I feel that every venue should have a copy. It creates some really good consistency, particularly in the terms that they use and the references. It provides some real clarity, particularly with your stakeholders. When do you include them? Who gets included? What's their role? And it really provides an outline, especially, I guess, as most of us experience, we're busy putting plans that work for us in our venues, and then you have those wider stakeholders, particularly those that are in local government who are wanting to get involved. So this is a really good document to refer them to as to what the roles are. the 8-step process. So I'm not going to go through this in detail because, as I said, this is a class sort of in a shortened version. And when we're in our classes at the VMS school, we have a timer at the back, and they're like, we have to stick to time. So, and I am conscious we're moving into afternoon tea and not too far away, and we've got a lot to get through. So I just wanted to highlight 2 things when you're going through this process. In particular, your emergency planning committee. Now, that is not the committee that manages the incident. That is the committee that puts your plans in place. They're responsible for the development, the implementation and the constant review of those plans. So they're a really different group, and you really need to think about who you're going to have in those groups and what they can bring to the table to develop your plan. And then your emergency control organisation, so that they use just different terms, but they're the people that are going to be managing that incident, both on the day but also afterwards. And it's really clear to sort of have what their roles are rather than the people, because as you know, in events we all are there at different times, so you need to be really clear on who the roles are and what they are. The plan, and I'm definitely not going to go through this big list. It's made up of a number of documents, and you're going to vary this depending on your venue and your size. You need to pull out what's relevant for you, and it won't be all one big plan. It's about pulling out the documents you need, but then separating it out. Not everybody needs to know all the information. So your duty manager who needs to deal with the incident probably doesn't need to have your training schedule, or potentially not even your business continuity plan. So it's just pulling that out. But the key thing with your plans is to create consistency and familiarity. And that's really important, because when you're dealing with an emergency or dealing with an issue, you want to be able to find the information when you need it, and so having the consistency allows that. They'll know on page 3 I need to find that information about who I need to contact now that I've dealt with the incident. So just ensure that you have those consistencies through your plan. I've just got a great example there, Palmerston North Venue. So that's their emergency management plan. It's a few years old, and I'm sure they've reviewed it over the time. But they've got on all their emergency management plans, this is their front page with the key information you need. Who are you going to ring and what's the location? So having that critical information. Right, this is the gold. Well, this is what I think the gold is. This is how you test your procedures and you develop the familiarity and the confidence so the team know how to deal with a situation occurs. It also allows you the opportunity to check your plans, make sure it works, come up with all those scenarios. Oh, what if this has changed? Oh, what do we do in that situation? For those of you who want to do team building, I think this is fantastic team building activity. You're learning, but there's no question's a dumb question, no scenario is silly, because you never know what's going to happen. So it's a great opportunity to get your team involved and get them talking through the plans. It's also, when you can, I think really important to get emergency services involved. That way they become familiar with their venue, but they also become familiar with the staff and the terminology you use, and you can do the same with them. So it's a great way of developing those relationships. Now, I know it's easier in some regions than others. Probably our smaller regions, we're lucky we've got more of a consistent emergency services team with people who you can develop those relationships for. So that's enough of me lecturing, and what we do in the class is do workshops. So I'm going to do an exercise now with you all. Now, I don't know how this is going to go, because normally there's only 30 in a classroom, and so this could be potentially very noisy, you all talking together, but we'll give it a go. What I want you to do is just talk through some of the things you need to think about in the procedures and your plans for this scenario. So it's the middle of a show, the Neil Diamond tribute show, Sweet Caroline. I think that's just toured recently. And it's first half, close to interval. You have a patron in the middle. Now, I've got a pointer. Oh, it does work, yay. He's about here somewhere. I'm not going to, point out anyone in particular, who has had a medical incident, suffered a fatal heart attack. They're there with his wife and a couple of family members. So what I want you to do is just talk about all the points that you need to think about for your emergency management plan, all the things that you need to consider. So I've got to check the time here. Oh yeah, I'm doing all right. Sort of give about 10 minutes to think through some of those plans around your table. And for those of you that only got a couple at your table, you might want to join in. So, some of the things you can think about is what's your decisions for making, your responses, what are you going to do with your performers, your tech staff. So have a think about those questions. All right, well, I'm sure you've had lots of interesting discussions of what you do in the situation and what you need to do afterwards. So I thought we'd just hear back a little bit and report back from the table. So I know there's quite a big group. So who stopped the show? What did you do? Who wants to share? Come on, this is where the gold is. We learn from each other. Don't be shy.
We said that if there's a duty manager or a venue manager on site, they should liaise with the client and make a joint decision as to what happens there.
I have to say something, being from St John. Number one priority is absolutely putting a defib on this person and starting CPR. So the first thing is get them out and get started.
Just on, sorry, St John's, didn't get the name. So you just say move them out?
Yeah, so
hold the bus.
In that particular picture, you don't have the space to manage a cardiac arrest, so it actually makes sense to take that 30 seconds extra longer just to get them out of the way to a place that you can manage them, because you need space to do CPR, which keeps the blood flowing and gives the chance of defibrillation greater success. And then obviously the sooner you get an AED, so an automatic external defibrillator on them, the better, because that's what essentially will stop the heart and give it a chance to start again.
Yeah, great.
Good question. Yeah, we've saved lives already. Paul McCarthy.
Thanks, Wayne. So just in the group here, we talked about obviously establishing, number one, that was the circumstance, making sure the communications that's coming back to the team is actually accurate. Was that a person who was going to an usher and saying, there's a dead person right there, so that you can get that first response going? The second response to that then is working out what your process with your stage manager is to be able to potentially stop the whole show, and then working out potentially whether you're evacuating the whole of that area or doing exactly what our friends from St John's said, was to move the person to a more accessible location to do better work on them, quality work.
What about your communications? How are you communicating? Do people sort of talk about who that, and sort of to carry on from what you're saying, how do you communicate with your audience? Then what about people outside of the venue? Well, these days with social media, things happen very fast, and people have heard that maybe something's happened at your venue. Who talked about their communication plans?
Privacy is pretty important as well, so getting some screens up around that person, or even, I suppose, as we've seen the football player, just standing around the person to give them some privacy, and then potentially having a staff member there explaining the situation and just saying, please kind of move on and give some space here. I suppose generally in that instance, the natural reaction is for people to go and have a look and see what's happening and being nosy. But I suppose it's just giving them that privacy of being able to hopefully get them back alive. And then obviously communicating will depend on communicating to all stakeholders and just giving them an update as to how the situation is going.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's the gold about the scenario training. You can think through how it's going to work in your mind. And I guess the beauty of seeing, for those of us that saw the news around the incident at Parkin Stadium, it makes you think, right, what do you need to do? And how did that naturally happen? Or were the staff there trained to think, right, what are the different scenarios that we have to do? Because this medical incident way of put it in a theatre, this could easily be in your sports arena during a NBL game. It could easily be at a concert or during a rugby game. So, you know, it's I guess this scenario is very transferable between all your venues. What about, people start talking about what their plan would be for the next day, for the next night, what's going to happen?
We just had a quick conversation about how if someone actually died in the theatre, how a lot of you'd have to make that space safe again. So inviting mana whenua in, doing a blessing, whatever was appropriate. So that would be important because obviously there'd be a lot of people that wouldn't want to come back into the theatre.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important to think of those cultural implications. So this is a really great exercise that you can do with your team because there's so many different scenarios, and I'm sure around the table that you've all had like very different thoughts. Is there anything else anybody like to add or share some gems that they learnt from that? Yeah, Dave. Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Just around staffing, checking in on the staff, offering AAP, etc. Making sure that they're okay because they'll be potentially coming back to work the next day.
Yeah, that's so important to check in on your staff because at the time, particularly, everyone's full of adrenaline, they're dealing with it. But afterwards, and it can have, you know, some real triggers for some people. That's great. All right.
I've got a question for everybody. Has COVID changed anything for you in terms of your emergency plan? Was the emergency plan completely separate from COVID, or did your COVID experience change any way that you looked at emergency and engaged your emergency planning committee and the way you conducted desktop exercises and the way that your business looked at risk management and that you might look at it more often? Has anyone got anything they want to share there in terms of how they changed the way? And I'm sure no one's going to speak now, so don't leave me hanging.
I'm actually a safety consultant, similar to Wayne. One of the things that I've seen in terms of venues in particular is that most of the authorities really only want you to deal with specific stuff about COVID, right? The reality is, because this is a holistic plan, that you need to integrate that with everything that you do. Your COVID stuff in particular, one of the main things that you want to make sure that you've got is a containment process so that you can identify an area like you would in a mass incident where you would have a mortuary. You want the same sort of idea in terms of that. You want to have the protocols in place. You want to have people set aside that would then only deal with that person until you can get them out of your venue, and also have a reliable way of integrating with people like St John's or your medical suppliers to make sure that that is being dealt with very specifically. But don't lose sight of the fact that you still have all of the rest of those risk factors in your venue that you want to integrate with. I mean, just your basic COVID stuff, you're talking about things like sanitation, deep cleaning, you know, those sorts of things as well. So think of how they impact on, you know, the services that you supply. If you're an audio company or you've got audio people working for you, if you're putting a lapel mic on someone, make sure that you've got a cleaning process. So that's some of the things that I've seen working with clients in venues.
Thanks, Paul. PBM Safety, sponsor. Go see him outside.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Great, thank you. So I just thought I'd talk about a couple of other key things that we need to think about emergency management planning, and this was sort of very topical prior to COVID and before our lockdown. And I guess prior to the 15th of March 2019, I think here in New Zealand we felt a little bit sheltered from some of the terrorist attacks. And unfortunately, the Christchurch mosque shooting shook everyone and showed how vulnerable we can all be. I've always sort of said this, that in New Zealand, I think the chances are it's likely to have someone who's mentally unstable, or I say random nutter, which I don't think is actually PC, but they are the people that can come in, and that could be anywhere. It could be, and excuse me for picking on these venues, but you know, it could be your little theatre down in Oamaru, it could be the sports stadium, TSB Stadium in New Plymouth. as we saw here in Auckland, you know, the gang shooting at the Sofitel, 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning, you know, so it can happen anywhere, any place. And I think the public are more conscious around this, or were particularly, and expect us to have some really robust processes in place. The crowded spaces, the New Zealand crowded spaces strategy came out in August 2020, and a lot of it is around the mitigation and the risk, so a really important document if you haven't read it, to read it. But the important part of that in your planning is to make sure that you're using I quite like this, this in your plan, because it is a New Zealand government document. And there's other numerous documents as well. So the Australian, this is a really good resource. It's from their tourism strategy. And Sue Max, she was one of the instructors who's actually at the venue management school. She was part of the committee that developed this. So it is really practical. She's a very, she runs a number of stadiums in New South Wales or in Sydney, but she's a very practical lady. So she's had some huge input. And of course she has that learnings too that she takes into the school. So these are some really good documents to refer to. There's also another one that actually Adam referred me to, which has got some really good information, and that's the crowded places planning under the Institute for Disaster Recovery in Australia. So they've got some really good documents too, if you are looking for something to work your plans from. So just a sort of reminder that we have as I said, the escape, hide and tell, and I guess the difference with a lockdown to an evacuation is that you need to lock down. So do you have a different siren? Do you have a different process for locking down? There is some challenges around fire evacuation systems, and people say that coming in to wreak havoc in your venue, they'll hit the fire alarm because they know that it'll open all the doors and everyone starts to evacuate. So do you have a system that can override it? So these are some of the things that you need to think about as part of that plan. You need to prevent people entering the area, and that's really important. People, and I think someone said it when we were talking before, people are instinctively nosy and they will come. So how do you stop that from happening? I've seen it firsthand. My son at his intermediate school last year, they had an armed defence situation, and we got a text, it was just as school was about to start. If you haven't brought your child to school, please don't bring them, we're in lockdown. So for the parents that had their kids at the school, and my husband was actually working across the road on his construction site, he said all of a sudden he texted me, because he didn't get the text that I got telling us all these people arrived and wanted to know what's happened. It created chaos. One, the police couldn't get in as easily as they could. Two, a couple of the parents went onto the site. So then the police, well, are they the person that's apparently running around with a gun, or are they the person we need to get? So it was about how you put that in. He actually used his traffic management barriers from his work site to help with the police to keep all the parents out. So it's little things like that, you know, they're going to naturally come, especially if they've got family members at that venue to come and have a look. So how do you manage that? The police response, and at the workshops that we did at EVANS a few years ago, we really talked about that. So the police priority when they arrive on site is to detain and mitigate that risk, to make sure that the offender is no longer a risk. So they will run past people that are injured or crying for help, because that has to be their first priority. So in that training that you do, and I guess I'm really hot on the scenario training, it's so important that you kind of make all your staff well aware of this. There's a video, I'm not going to show it because I know we're running out of time. This is the only video I can find. It's a UK one, but it is a good one to sort of watch and to say, you know, it gives to use for your staff training, just to make them think about the things that they need to do. So I'm going to go on and just talk quickly about human behaviour, and it's about how people react. And it's everyone, and I guess I just talked about that, the natural instinct is to evacuate, but sometimes you need them to you need them to stay in, and how do you manage that? And ensuring that, as we all know, the fear can relate to panic. So the more your staff are trained and aware of your emergency management plan, the more confidence they can give. And while they'll be afraid, it's a natural instinct, they won't lead to that panic because it's right, this is what we need to do. And then also really being aware of how you react. It's really important because things trigger things for us. And so what are your staff, who's in that best role to deal with that, what they want to do? And that's really important as well. And to be aware of that in your planning and ensure that you've got the right people in the right roles. So that's critical as well. Now I'm just going to show a video, which I thought just after, So as you can see, people react very differently. And it shows the importance of planning. So I thought it was just a nice way to lighten after talking a little bit of heaviness around emergency management preparedness, and it always sometimes triggers a few things. So just a real quick summary, and then we'll just wrap up with a couple of things. It's important for every venue, we all know that. Engage your stakeholders, so important, St John's, your police, fire, so that they're familiar with your venue. Collaboration, that's the value. Scenario training, can't stress enough how important that is. That's a really good, robust way to test your procedures and make sure they're working. And if things change, all of a sudden, a year later, you might have another building right outside your door, and that will create some differences, and you can do that training. Documents that are clear, and it's a live document, as I said. So that's all about emergency management planning training. We've got a couple of minutes. We just want to do a few little things about the school. Has anybody got any burning questions around emergency management training or anything that they want to? You can always come and see me after the session if you like, or Wayne. All right. Yeah, so I recommend, this is really interesting. I recommend that you do it every 2 years, and I think that's what's in the standard. But you should be regularly reviewing them, because hopefully you're doing your scenario training or you're going through your training, and it's at that point you're actually going to work out whether they're working, whether something's changed, either physically, your building's changed, the door's changed, or your neighbourhood's changed, or whether you've got people changes that you need to account for. So it's kind of a live document, but you do need to go through it really robustly, and that's what that emergency planning committee is responsible for, and ensuring that it has been done. So, thanks. That's it. Great. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nelita. I think there was a guy from The Hangover in that. That was always going to end badly, that video. I just thought there's a number of people here who have done the school, and we've just asked them perhaps if they could say a couple of words, and one of them's right here, just about, any of the benefits.
So I went through the school right from year 1 and year 2, and then thought a little bit about doing the LI school, and wasn't really sure how much I'd get out of it, and I got loads out of it in the end. I found it really challenging in some ways, especially when they made me do the speech at the end. But with 3-hour lessons and the kind of the quality of the instructors, it was really useful. So yes, I would highly recommend, if you're kind of at that stage in your career when you think that there's nothing more that you can learn, it's actually a good time to go along and learn some more.
Thanks, Mark. That was a cracking speech, by the way, if I remember. Megan, Napier, regional venue. You did year 1?
Yes, yeah. So I did year 1, and unfortunately haven't been able to do year 2 yet because of COVID. So hopefully showing interest this year or next year. It was, for me, being from regional Napier, I thought it was quite daunting before I got there to go in with, the big venues and stuff in Australia and the cities in New Zealand, but it was the connections that I made and the learnings from having tutors that are out of, they're working in the industry currently, and the best of the best, with their experiences and bringing it to us every day was just so relevant, the topics that we went through. So really looking forward hopefully to joining my classmates again, because we do set up, you know, your Facebooks and you make those connections that you can call on anyway, years to come.
Thank you. All right, I'm conscious we're just about out of time, so I just had a couple of things to wrap up with there. So I guess just to summarise the school itself, there's 18 topics in Year 1 and 18 in Year 2. You do get the notes, and there are also detailed notes that support the slides, which are, you know, a very valuable resource after the school. The networking, again, is invaluable. The scholarship program, so the Leadership Institute, last time we ran it in 2019, and the same will happen again this year, that we have a scholarship program where you can apply. There'll be details of that released shortly from the VMA office. That will subsidise your enrolment fee by 50%. There's also the Ungerbok bursary, which is the highest scoring exam result from Year 1, which pays for the Year 2 enrolment, and also the ASM Global Scholarship, which pays for when we're allowed back into the States, that to attend the Leadership Institute or GI Graduate Institute, as they call it over there. And of course, James Parkinson from Auckland Stadiums and Kathy Chambers have both won that in previous years, who are obviously Kiwis. Cancellation, I know, is on everybody's mind. The travel bubble's proven that we can do stuff. It's getting better every day. Get vaccinated is my tip. This industry can't operate in its old form until we all do. I know there's some supply issues, as they are in Australia, the same problem here. If there is a travel issue with regards to individual breakouts, then we'll work with you to make sure that you know, you're fairly compensated, and that obviously if the school has to cancel, there's a cancellation policy on that. We want you to express your interest. I know some of you have potential to commit funds before end of financial year, so we'd love to hear from you, and hopefully you've been thinking about the school already. But importantly, Michael Brealey and the VMA office would love to know that you're coming. I know also there are some of you who can't make that decision yet, and we've all seen that over the last few years, is the delay in the purchasing decision, and I'm sure the school will be the same. But you know, it's a real trade-off for us. We've got to start releasing rooms if people don't commit, and we all need to, you know, be committed to getting the professional development back up and running, and the school's a very important part of that. So look, just to finish up, the school is from Sunday the 7th to Friday the 12th of November. It's at a beautiful location, and we'd love to see you all there. So thank you very much for your time. Kia ora.